Okay, I have 7 o'clock. Are we good to go?
We are good to go, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome. The City Council is returning after a brief recess. We met at 6 p.m. this evening for a closed session. All members are present this evening. And tonight, we have President Lisa Jackson of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who will lead us in tonight's invocation, followed by Reed Johnson from the Boy Scouts, who will be leading us in the pledge. Ms. Jackson?
Our dear Father in heaven, as we gather this evening in this virtual meeting, we pray for thy blessing and thy guidance in our lives. We're grateful to have such a wonderful community and to live in this free country. We're grateful for those men and women who serve us here in this local area, and pray for them as they make decisions concerning the citizens and the businesses. We ask thee to watch over and protect them for their service. We are so grateful for the many blessings we receive at thy hands. We're mindful of thy help throughout this past few years of pandemic. And we pray that thou will continue to guide us and bless us with peace and comfort. And now we thank thee for this time and pray for thy blessings and thy spirit to guide all, and do so in the sacred name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the
Allegiance
flag
of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
and
and
justice
justice for all.
for all.
Please be seated.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson, and thank you, Reed. Appreciate that. That takes us to our student reports. We are very excited tonight to have our students joining us once again. And so tonight, to lead us off from Glendora High School, Nadia Bashir.
We are still waiting for her to log on, Mayor, if we can skip.
Okay, all right, very good. Then we will go to Charter Oak High School. Pollock, welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Pulk Tripathi, and I'm the student representative for Charter Oak High School, and the following is my report for the month of February. So City of Hope Blood Drive. Charter Oak is hosting a City of Hope Blood Drive on February 23rd, in which students can participate if they meet the requirements to donate blood for a good cause. Sadie Hawkins dance. So Charter Oak's first Sadie Hawkins dance of the year is coming up, and the dance is going to take place at Charter Oak in the quad on February 25th. And clubs around the campus are prepping for the dance by running their own booths to sell a variety of stuff and also raise money for the dance. Spring athletics. So spring athletics are underway, and we have been anticipating the return of sports and the beginning of league games. Boys and girls basketball, girls water polo, boys tennis, girls and boys soccer, golf, softball, and swim have begun and have been preparing for the league games to begin. On March 10th, Royal Oak 8th graders are going to visit the Charter Oak campus and are going to give a tour. And lastly, Charter Oak have been preparing and helping their seniors apply to colleges and scholarships for the past few months. And we've had many colleges come on campus to help apply many students and have had many scholarship opportunities given to our seniors. And as of right now, seniors are anticipating their decision letters, which are yet to come. And that's it for right now.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here tonight, and welcome back. And next from St. Lucy's Priory High School, Olivia.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Once again, my name is Olivia Risk, and I am the student representative for St. Lucy's Priory High School. I have anticipated giving this report today, as it is my first one since November of last year. We started the month of December off with our annual Gift for Girls drive, where St. Lucie students and staff donated items like hair ties and headbands, as well as toiletries to the Tijuana mission. Our ASB helped kick off the Christmas festivities by celebrating St. Nick's feast day on the 6th and even passed out candy canes. On December 12th, we had our first annual tree lighting event in the amphitheater. It was such a wonderful celebration of light and Christmas cheer. The following day, we celebrated the Feast of St. Lucie and our sophomore class with a medal ceremony and mass. My fellow students and I studied rigorously the week of the 20th as we took our final exams and ended the first semester. We then enjoyed a much-needed Christmas break. We returned to school on January 12th, and we're so blessed to have our Kairos 89 retreat 2 weeks later. Being lucky enough to experience and be on the retreat, it was such an incredible experience. I will never forget it. Our freshman and sophomore class retreats have already taken place, while our junior class retreat is scheduled for March 14th. Catholic Schools Week, the annual celebration of Catholic education in the United States, was celebrated on our campus from January 31st to February 5th. Our ASB and class officers prepared signs on our lockers that reminded us of God's love and even held a prayer service. All grade levels enjoyed lunch on the lawn on February 11th. And on February 16th, we had our winter sports rally in the gym. Each grade level went head-to-head in 4 rounds of competition in various games and recited their class cheers. Ultimately, our seniors kept their year-long winning streak. Our varsity water polo team finished 2nd place in the Baseline League and went on to compete in the first round of CIF. Our varsity soccer and JV and varsity basketball teams finished their incredible seasons off about 2 weeks ago. We are so proud of all their hard work. The spring sports, softball, swim and dive, and track and field have all started their practices and have even begun participating in meets and tournaments. It is with a heavy heart that I share the news of the passing of our beloved Sister Monica Collins. Sister Monica was known for her incredible service in education and remembered by everyone for her understanding and care for all members of our school community. Beginning in September 1972, she taught English and religion at St. Lucie's for 8 years, until she became principal in 1980 and served an astonishing 33 years of recognizable leadership. We are hosting the last HSPT, High School Placement Testing opportunity, on our campus this Saturday, the 26th. And our last Regent Shadow Day, which is open to all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, is on March 24th. To register for either event, we ask that you please visit our website. Excitingly, the class of 2026 will receive their acceptances and sign deliveries on March 4th. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Appreciate you being here tonight. And has Nadia had a chance to sign in?
No. I'll have to reach out with her tomorrow, but she did confirm last week. Probably an emergency is what might have happened.
Okay, yes, no worries. All right, thank you. Well, then we will go on to reordering of or additions to the agenda. I understand that Mayor Pro Tem Boyer has a request to reorder the agenda.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that we reverse items 12 and 13. I think it might be appropriate to have item 13 discussed first.
Does anyone have any objections?
No.
Okay, then we will reverse those two. All right, that takes us to public comment. We invite members of the public to address the city council on items that are on the agenda or other items of concern. At this time, if you wish to speak, you can use the raise hand icon and we will call upon you. Also, you can send in your comments via email at publiccomments@cityofglendora.org. Do we have anyone at this time wishing to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, we've received no requests via the attendees of the meeting and no public comments received via the email, public comment email.
Okay, we'll make one more request. If there's anyone wishing to speak, now is the time to use the raise hand icon. Okay, well, seeing none, then I will close the public comment time and bring it back to the council for statements and reports. Councilmember Thompson.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Just a very short update on our goal line. As many of us are seeing each and every day, there's a lot of work being done. Very pleased to indicate that the station work has started and that is moving well. Bridges are also getting a lot of work done. 66 Bridge is going well and should be done by 10/22. Foothill and Grand Bridge should be done by 12/22. First week in April, there's going to be a lot of work being done there as the bridge span will be built. And so be aware of that. Traffic is going to be in a different format. So you'll need to be aware and take your time to get through Foothill and Grand. But that's going along well. And Lone Hill Bridge should be done by 1/23. The anchor support walls on the 210/57, which most of us don't see, but are really important as the train will start to go up and over Lone Hill. Those are going well. Pasadena is good news there is that SCE got their work done. We're thrilled about that because that has pushed that back a little bit, but it should be done, opened up by March the 31st. We're hoping that that's March the 25th, but for sure by March the 31st. Michael will be very pleased about this. The road that he travels north and south. Michael, you want to say that magic road? Barranca?
Barranca, you got it.
As many of you might know, there's been a little unintended dip going northbound. And so I am told by the end of next week that dip will be smoothed out and it should be good. And so happy to hear that. One last thing, Little League, as all of us know, the Major League is locked out, but Little League is never locked out, except the last year or two when COVID locked it out. But American Lassie League will kick off on March the 5th, and National League will kick off on March the 12th. So if you want to see some exciting baseball, come out and watch the girls, the boys play. It's always a lot of fun. And with that, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alawas.
Thank you, Karen. At last week's COG meeting, the County of Los Angeles made a presentation on providing broadband infrastructure and services in the county that they deem was lacking such services, and the telecommunication industry has not made significant investments to date. To put all this into perspective or context, back in 2018, the League of California Cities and a majority of California cities defeated SB 649 with a veto from the then Governor Jerry Brown that would have taken local control away from cities in favor of telecommunications industries to install their own hardware whenever and wherever they chose without city oversight. And then recently, SB 556 was passed in September 2021, the overwhelming majority from the California legislature that removed those local controls to the telecommunications industry. So the county now is coming back with 3 options for selective telecommunications spending, and they are to provide $30 to $50 a month subsidy to eligible residents for internet, build out wireless infrastructure at the cost of $600 million in capital and $800 million in operating costs over 10 years, build a fiber to home network that the county states would cost billions without stating an overall cost, but does state that the operating cost over a 10-year period is approximately $400 million. The county is also weighing in on 3 options for implementation: private, public-private, and or just simply public. Either way, this could be seen as a gift to the telecommunications industry as a whole. And so we'll wait to see how that all rolls out and what ends up happening on that front, but the taxpayers will be on the hook for that, whether it's from the federal or state or combination thereof. It's still taxpayer debt. I'd like to first off thank the PD and the FBI for the presentation this last Thursday evening that focused on common scams and frauds. It was informational and entertaining. I know that Agent Simon did a really good job of his presentation. Some folks missed the event and want to know when we're planning another one. As of this point in time, we have not planned anything, but obviously next time we'll have a little more lead time for more advertisement. This coming Thursday evening at 6 p.m., there will be a community meeting at 250 Clementine Street to discuss the La Colina development. This is also for the folks in the area that are impacted by that development for the La Colina and also the current residents of that new area. One quick little short PSA for community health centers in California. They have more than 1,300 facilities in California that provide healthcare services to low income and the uninsured. Their website is https://www.cpca.org. So if you just simply remember cpca.org, that will get you to where you need to be. The closest facility is in Covina. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendahl.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no reports tonight.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Thank you, Karen. Got a few things. First off, Foothill Transit, our bus system in the area, we had our strategic planning session this past week, and it's important to note that ridership on public transportation is low at this point due to the pandemic, but we're continuing to plan for the future. So Foothill Transit is moving forward with their goal of having a completely zero emission bus line by 2040. And so we know that public transportation is going to be even more important in the future as Los Angeles County continues to grow. At the COG Regional Housing Trust, I just wanted to report we had the ability to fund another 56-bed homeless housing project in the city of Montebello. So that group, we're continuing to move forward to find opportunities to fund shelter for those in need. At the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, it's great to be able to share that we had the opportunity to fund the purchase of approximately 103 acres above Claremont a couple of weeks ago in order to protect it from future development. So we're continue to work on trying to protect our foothills to make sure that we don't lose that asset that we all love so much. I'd also like to recognize that this past Saturday was the 80th anniversary of the U.S. government issuing Executive Order number 9066, which placed over 100,000 of our neighbors who were of Japanese descent into internment camps back during World War II. There are things that have happened in the past that we have learned from. And this is one of those things that we look back on it, and it's hard to imagine that a decision like this was made. And as we talk about things happening in the past, I can tell you that there's at least one resident of Glendora who was interned in one of those camps. And so he was a young child at the time that this happened. But even though it's in the past, some of this history 80 years ago is a long time. but this is still in the memories of some of our neighbors, and it's important that we never forget about things like this, and more importantly, that we never repeat it. Last thing I'd like to request, I want to ask if there would be any interest in placing an item on our next agenda to discuss writing a letter of concern to Dr. Tomas Aragon, the director of the California Department of Public Health, the California State Board of Education, Governor Newsom, and LA County supervisors, and anyone else that may be appropriate, to request to remove the indoor mask mandate for our students. The states lifted the indoor mask mandate at this point. LA County, we're still fighting that battle, but statewide, they left it in place for our students. And in my opinion, there's no data or science to support a decision like that. I don't think we're crossing the line between city and school district decisions and opinions, because these students and their families are also our residents. And sometimes we can make statements and requests that might be a little bit more difficult for school boards because they're governed differently. We're not talking about any particular school district, public or private, but I'd like to speak on behalf of the students that live in Glendora and their families, and quite frankly, for my own grandkids. The decision makers have a lot of pressure on them already, and this may very well be resolved by the time we get back together on March 8th. But I don't want to wait any longer and take a chance that it may not be. So I would like for us to put that discussion on the agenda for March 8th, and I'm just wondering if I could get a second on that.
I will second that motion.
Appreciate it, David. And again, we can have the discussion, and hopefully this will be resolved before then, and we won't need to have that discussion. But that's all I had. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. And I would say an amen to the executive order of 80 years ago, that we need to learn from those things and make a point of not repeating some of those choices and behaviors. So thank you for bringing that up. A couple of events coming up in the near future that give the community a chance to help those who are facing food insecurity. The annual crop walk will be Sunday, March 13th. You could go to the crop walk website and sign up as an individual or a team. And then also March 11th, 5 to 7 p.m. Empty bowls will be outdoors this year in the parking lot at 300 North Glendora Avenue. So we invite folks to come get some soup to go and pick out a beautiful bowl. And as we think of those individuals who make a difference in giving back to the community and giving back to our nation, this last week, the Glendora community lost one such individual, Gary Andrews. Not only is Andrews Inc. clothing store an anchor in the village, but Gary Andrews himself has been an anchor not only to the village, but to the community, and his leadership and service. Long before there was a business improvement district, he was part of the village merchants and trying to put on programs, giving back through a variety of outlets, as well as being a patriot and serving our nation in the Army National Guard as a sergeant major. And so I ask tonight that we adjourn our meeting in Gary's memory, giving thanks for his many contributions to our community and shaping our community by his service and his many contributions. So with that, that takes us to our city manager and city attorney. Do you have any reports or statements you would like to make tonight?
None from me, Mayor.
And none from me, Mayor.
Okay, very good. Then that takes us to special items. And tonight, Councilmember Friedendahl will be making a presentation to Reed Johnson. So Councilmember Friedendahl, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And tonight it's a distinct privilege to recognize a young man from Glendora who has done something many of us will never be able to say we've done. And it's a local Boy Scout, George Reed, he goes by Reed Johnson, made an extraordinary trip this last December in our winter, but where he went, it was summertime, although it's never summer in my opinion there. Reed accompanied an expedition to Antarctica as the first Boy Scout group to attend there as official scouts. It was a co-ed group of approximately 20 members plus leaders. And I think that it's a very extraordinary activity for any young man to do. You know, we have national jamborees, we have world jamborees, we have high adventure trips. I think this exceeds most of those in a unique way. And for the Reed's family to support him, for his leaders, and we have two of the leaders with him tonight to observe this proclamation presentation. But we have Elizabeth Morgan, his crew adventure advisor from Laguna Woods, from crew 774. And we have the expedition leader, Dr. Jeff Bozanik, who's also a scouter extraordinaire and has the vision to lead. And the fact that our scout leaders can prepare these young men with the courage and confidence to make such a trek and an expedition and go there. Elizabeth and Jeff and Mrs. Johnson, thank you so much. What a neat thing. I had some involvement in the National Jamboree, but I don't think that even touches what you guys are doing. And I also believe that besides Reed's mother on board, we have his grandparents joining us tonight. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you for spending the evening with us. And with that, I wish to present Reed with the proclamation from the City of Glendora. And it reads as, whereas George Reed Johnson is a freshman at Glendora High School, and whereas Reed is a member of Troop 491 Scouts BSA in Glendora, and as well as a member of Crew 774 Venture Scouts BSA in Laguna Woods. And whereas in December 2021, as part of Venture Crew 774, Reed was one of 20 scouts invited to go to Antarctica to participate in a once-in-a-lifetime adventure and science research expedition. And whereas at 14 years of age, Reed was the youngest solo scout on the excursion with no accompanying parent. And whereas during the 19-day expedition, Reed stepped foot on 3 continents, North America, South America, and Antarctica. And whereas under the leadership of Dr. Bozanik, Venture Crew 774 participated in activities which included research, team building, exploration, glacier travel, diving, camping, wildlife observation, kayaking, hiking, boating, and a polar swim. Summertime, remember. Now, therefore, we, the City Council, wish to congratulate Boy Scout Reed Johnson for his courage in completing this monumental assignment with enthusiasm and thank him for the contributions he has made towards scientific research. In witness whereof, the mayor has set her hand and caused the seal of the City of Glendora to be affixed this 22nd day of February 2022. And this is also very fitting as today is celebrated as the International Founders Day of Boy Scouts. So a great day and an opportunity that comes together. And congratulations, Reed, and thank you to the leaders who helped him accomplish this wonderful lifetime journey. So with that, Reed, would you care to share a moment about your expedition?
Yes. I feel very honored to be recognized by the Glendora City Council tonight, and I would like to express my gratitude towards the city for the support of the scouting program. I'd like to specifically thank Troop 491 Scoutmaster Alva Terry, Antarctic Expedition leaders Elizabeth Morgan and Dr. Jeff Bozanik, my mother Carrie, my brother Will, all of my teachers that let me skip finals week, or at least postpone them while I went on my expedition, and all of my grandparents. The Antarctic expedition that I participated in was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that I will surely never forget. I look forward to many, many more years spent in the scouting program, both in the city of Glendora and beyond. Thank you all tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedendahl, and thank you, Reed. Thank you for your example and your leadership, and kudos to your family as well for their support. And I'm sure the example they have given you as well in your endeavors. So thank you.
Most welcome.
That takes us to item 6, Mr. City Manager, the COVID-19 reopening of the economy update.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Brief update from me this evening. Last time we spoke, we talked about the state of California ending its indoor mask mandate effective February 16th for those people not on public transit, healthcare, corrections, or schools. That policy was not mirrored in Los Angeles County. It's been subject to quite a bit of political social media posts from supervisors and other staff within LA County. We received word today, there are some news reports from a couple of the supervisors that the county intends to make a change to its health order as early as this Friday, allowing those agencies or those businesses that do a vaccine verification to potentially allow fully vaccinated individuals to be without a mask indoors. As we have more details, we will update the city council and our signage on City Hall accordingly. And just a little bit of background, we'll work with the mayor pro tem and council member on their March 8th request. Previously, the city council has approved 2 such letters to both our state and county supervisors about encouraging sort of a freedom of choice, so to speak, among various COVID infection protocols, which did include masking, as long as there were parameters set. So there is a precedent for that type of letter to have been issued previously, and we'll work with the mayor pro tem and the council member on a proposed letter to our state and local officials. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Right, that takes us to public hearings. Tonight we have none. Next is the consent calendar. Items 7 through 11 can be approved with one motion, and I understand that we will be continuing item 11.
Yes, Mayor, the request is to continue item 11 to a date not to exceed April.
Okay, very good. Do we have a motion to approve items 7 through 10?
I would move that.
I'll second.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Thompson, a second by Councilmember Alawas. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes,
That passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
thank you.
And I'll move item number 11 to the first meeting of April.
The
Second.
request was to move it to a meeting not to extend past April.
Okay, well then the last meeting in March.
No, our request is to come back no later than April. So
Don't you
First-
want to have it? Don't you want to have a date certain?
no, sir.
Okay. Withdrawn.
And do we need to take a vote on that, or that's just staff direction?
It was part of the original motion.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So we don't need any further action, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, that takes us to member agenda items. And previously, there was the request to switch item 13 and 12. So that takes us to item 13. Provide direction to staff regarding the waiving of business license taxes for multifamily business owners, requested by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer and Councilmember Alawas. And Assistant City Manager Lopez will be reporting.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. As Mayor Davis just mentioned, the item before you this evening is a request for the City Council to consider waiving the applicable business license tax for multiple family residential property owners in an effort to make housing more affordable in Glendora. Just quickly by way of background, in May of 2021, the City Council directed staff to look at creative ways to help reduce the cost of housing locally in our community. That direction came by the way of a study session on inclusionary housing, where the council discussed a variety of subjects related to housing, its affordability, the need for local control and zoning regulations, the development of potential incentives to facilitate its development in some forms, as well as just the cost of housing and who bears that impact, among other items. A follow-up conversation in December of 2021 restarted the discussion, but focused on actions that the city could take more immediately, considering the broader conversation that I referred to. To this end, staff has evaluated the possibility of waiving the business license taxes for multiple family residential property owners to help offset or mitigate any potential future rent increases. As it currently stands, Title V of the Glendora Municipal Code outlines the city's regulations relative to business license and regulations, including for these specific types of properties. Our records indicate that we have 124 properties citywide that fall under this category, totaling approximately 2,491 units. The business license tax amount that is required for each of these properties is dependent on the number of units on the property. The table that is outlined on page 2 provides kind of an outline of the example of fees that these properties would be required to pay to the city, depending on the number of units on their respective property. Waiving the business license tax will reduce revenue to the city by $9,370, or approximately 2% of the total annual business license revenue that is collected by the city. If direction is received to proceed, staff will need to identify an alternate funding source to help offset this revenue loss. With me tonight is Marie Ricci, the Administrative Services Director. We both stand ready to answer any questions you may have on this particular item. And with that, Mayor, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer, did you want to add comments to this?
Sure, thanks, Karen. You know, the way I'm reading the agenda item wasn't really the direction that I was what I was looking for. Again, my thought when we talked about this, it's very limited what we can do on a local level in order to try to have incentives to keep the cost of housing down. You know, so many of the discussions are around taxing housing and, you know, certain types of housing in order to subsidize others. My thought process was the idea of if we could have an incentive to landlords, and this talks about multifamily residential business owners, and I was looking at any and all rental units because all landlords are required to have business licenses. But if we could have the ability of, if a landlord did nothing more than not raise the rent from one year to the next, we could have the ability of having either waiving a business license fee or having some sort of a discount of the business license fee. Now, I don't, you know, even begin to believe this is going to have a huge impact on anybody. But if it just convinces one landlord to keep the rent the same from one year to the next for one family, it could keep a family in a home. I've shared my opinion on here many times before that, you know, $1 in rent every month could make a difference to somebody. There's some point that a home no longer is affordable to someone. So this is a very, very small step, but I am not really asking, my ask is not to waive all business license fees, but to create some sort of a program that would be an incentive that we could use to try to help landlords not raise rent from one year to the next. So I don't know if that was addressed, if it was looked into. I know there's going to be complications. There's complications with everything the government does, but that is what I was looking for. And I'm not sure if, Michael, if you wanted to have any other opinions on this.
Well, actually, I was on the same line thinking as you are, that it should be across the board. It shouldn't be just outlining just multiple families. It should be across the board because the whole idea is to make it less expensive. But I've got some other questions, more of a housekeeping thing. So what services does the city provide when they give or approve a business license and they pay their fees? What do they get in return, or what does the city, what's the purpose of that?
Sure. So I'll take a step back and just explain the business license revenue in general. So the City of Glendora is a business license tax. It's a general fund revenue, which is to pay for streets, roads, police services, field improvements on parks. These were really prevalent as cities, especially began to incorporate as taxing business to provide for its community for quality of life services. It is a general fund revenue that goes into the general fund that pays for the operation of the city, which is the overall intention of these revenues. It's not a special tax. It's not a special revenue, which is used for one portion. It goes into the overall operation. Generally speaking, there are two types of business license costs. One is a business tax, which we have in the City of Glendora. The second is a business license fee. And in a fee structure, it cannot increase past the cost of providing that service, which is essentially equating for a level playing field of businesses that apply. Our overall fee structure here is quite low.
Okay, so you say it is a tax?
It is a tax. We have a tax structure in the city.
So if we were to waive this and then a year or two down the road want to come back and do this, does Prop 218 kick in?
No.
Okay, but it's a tax though.
Prop 218 handles how fees are charged.
Right. Prop 218 deals with imposition, not with waiver.
Okay, so a lot of times when you apply for a business license, you also have to have a diagram of the facility that goes into the records in case there's fire or whatever, so they know what they're dealing with. Is there a cost associated with staff time processing business licenses?
So there's a $35 renewal fee, and I don't know what the one-time fee. Assessor Marie, do you happen to know what the one-time new setup fee is?
No.
I think it's about $70 and the initial setup fee. I know Jeff's on the call as well, but different types of businesses have different types of requirements when they're setting up a business for their original business license criteria. Oftentimes it's associated with the type of business that they open.
So this brings me, are there any health and safety issues related to business licenses?
Can you provide us an example that we can look?
Well, that's why I gave you the lead in. If you have you have to provide a diagram of your facility so that when fire comes in or somebody comes in, they know what the internal structure looks like. So that would be health and safety, in my opinion.
So typically speaking, the layout of a facility is included on building plans and other related planning related submissions. There are certain business requirements for like tenant improvements, for example. However, all that said, the requirement wouldn't be you would forgo a business license, as I understand the proposal. And I apologize, Mayor Pro Tem, if we didn't capture the overall articulation of your request. The city would provide a business license. They'd still have to be, follow through with the annual renewal. It's just that the cost of doing that would be zero. So I don't believe there would be any impacts to health and safety in any thought process here. You would just get a certificate that costs you $0.
Okay, that's on the renewal, but on the first time go around, you'll have to pay the first initial fee.
$77 is the new business license fee, and that covers the staff time to process the fee, which may include going through the planning process, which talks about the building and safety aspect of submitting the plans to make sure it's the new business being opened is in the right zone from the fire perspective and those aspects of it. So that's all inclusive, and it's only when you first apply as a new business into the city.
So if we make this citywide with all rentals, we don't know what that number would be. It's going to be great, much larger than $9,000.
Well, I think there's a question here on how much the city's not collecting now. So if it's a single family rental that's there, we may not have record of that having a business license. The city historically, from a cultural perspective, has not been incredibly aggressive in ensuring that every business has a license, or some businesses have the 4 licenses in which they qualify for example. So there are a lot of potential rentals that we're receiving now which may not have a business license. So we're not receiving that funding now.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for this moment. Thank you.
Okay, if I could just add on to a couple of things that Michael was asking about. Just looking at the numbers, and this is what I do in my day job. It appears to me as though probably less than half of the rentals in the city of Glendora are licensed right now at this point. And one of the issues that I think business licenses in general, including these, are important is that, there are services that the city of Glendora provides to everybody within the city, whether they live here or not. And if we have a business owner that does not live in the city of Glendora who's doing business in the city, without the license fees, we could possibly have somebody that's taking advantage of and utilizing our services without paying anything to help support those services. So I don't have a problem with business license fees in particular. And to speak on this, our license fees are very, very low. I can share from my own personal experience. I have a rental property in a neighboring city that the license fee is over $300 for a unit that I am renting for about $1,500 a month. It's a very small unit above a commercial space, but so about $30 a month of my tenant's rent is going toward business license fees. So this is a small step, but at least it's a step in the right direction of having some sort of an incentive for landlords to not raise rents from one year to the next, which is what I was looking for and what I was hoping for support. And, if we gave direction to look into this, staff could come back to us and let us know what something like this might look like, or if it's even legally possible. So that is what I'm looking for support on tonight.
The Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me, if I can ask just a couple clarifying questions to help staff
Sure.
with the parameters that's there. So theoretically, the city could send out a letter through its business tax with HDL to everyone that has a rental facility, whether it's a single family rental home or a multifamily project. And essentially it is the proposed program would be if they do not raise rent for any units from year to year, that they would qualify for a waiver of business license fees upon their certification that's happening.
Yes. And
Okay.
I could see that being as simple as part of the application or part of the process of renewing the license.
Yes.
Is we just have an affidavit that says we didn't raise the rent and it needs to be confirmed by the tenant.
In that specific process, we'd have to work with HDL on how that process would work. However, I would think that our fiscal impact would obviously be much different. To your point, I'm not sure there would be really, I don't know who would take advantage of that to have any sort of fiscal impact at that time. It would be one of those things that we'd have to come back to city council, in a year and tell you, here's what the offset was, and here's where staff found the money to make up that difference if that is the direction of the council. But that in and of itself is more of a procedural process on our end that we'd have to walk through with HDL, but definitely something that would be doable.
So would this be a box, Gary? Would you see this being a box on your business license if you wanted to take advantage of this, and then have instructions of what you have to do, the affidavit and the clarification or the approval from the tenant?
Yes, something, I'm sure there's a way to do it. But yeah, it would be something like that if you're going to request that waiver, then there'd be additional documentation that'd be needed. And I agree, this is not going to, I don't think we're going to have 1,000 landlords in town knocking our door down to take advantage of this waiver, because we're not talking a whole lot of money, but it's something. And at some point, we in the state of California have to do something to try to turn this trend around of increasing the cost of housing in general, but especially to renters, which is going to be the next item we discuss. But I'm just looking for Glendora to take a step in that direction. And, is that something that we're willing to take on?
Councilmember Alawas or Friedendahl, do either of you have questions or comments?
We have a couple.
Okay, Mr. Friedendahl.
I think we've already identified that single family residences are on an honor system, so we may or may not know how many are in town doing rentals. That's correct? Is that correct? I believe so.
So our ordinance calls for those who are landlords that have 4 or more units renting. Anything below that doesn't have to report.
Okay, so because we've alluded to, there may or may not be single family residences with business licenses. We also had a discussion a few meetings ago regarding ADUs and rental or business licenses to rent an ADU. So we were looking at originally in this discussion before Gary spoke about the changed parameters he was actually thinking about. We were talking about ADU rental licenses and how to offset some of those fees, and our staff report indicates $9,000-$10,000 of lost revenue. So I had a question of, could those ADU rental licenses and add to that the STR short-term rental licenses, would that help offset some of those missed revenues? But if we're looking at this as a elective opportunity, that kind of changes those questions of those needs. And I don't know, I have to really wonder how many landlords would elect to avoid a business license fee in lieu of a nominal rent increase. It's encouraging and it sounds great, but I wonder how many would actually exercise that opportunity. And then I guess my last question would be, are we looking at this as a perpetual thing or as an opportunity that might have a sunset on it down the road a ways? Things to throw out as options to exercise or look at. Thank you.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you. I would support Gary's thought on having staff take a different look at this. Certainly, Gary, I appreciate you saying what you did, because that is certainly different than what I had read. So I'm of a mind to table this or withdraw this and allow staff to noodle on what you have said and come back with something else. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that Mayor Pro Tem Boyer wants to talk about rent control. Thank you very much for wanting to put some controls on rents. But I think that, if we were to do anything like this, that I would only want to support it if there was that direct connection, that we knew that, as you mentioned, that the people renting were actually benefiting from this waiving of fees, because I wouldn't want to waive the business license tax and then have those owners just pocket that savings. I'd want to have it structured in a way that you don't get the benefit unless you do something. But on this subject of lowering costs, this is one idea, but I think as we continue to try to make housing affordable, that not only do we need more product out there, but also we need more ways to address this, that there are multiple ways that we can make housing more affordable. And so I think the council really needs to have a discussion on multiple ways to do that, because not one size fits all. And we're not going to solve this with just one or two fixes. It's going to take several ways to address this. So those would be my concerns.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
I agree completely, Karen. This is a baby step. But on the rent control issue, I would never support increasing rents, which is all rent control ever does. So we'll have that conversation, that debate at a later time. But to go back to David's point, you asked about putting a sunset on this. I don't believe anything like that would be necessary, because any council in the future, because I think of the way this could be structured, could just stop the program. So I'm not sure if there's a necessity. I don't know, Bill or Adam, if you could speak to that, but I don't think it would be necessary to have a sunset put in place.
No, but every year, depending on what the amount is, we'd have a financial, small true up on the back end if anyone takes advantage of a program like that. How the actual program would work, I think staff, if that's the direction of the council, we could definitely figure that out. I think we have enough direction from the council to implement something that was discussed, and be happy to return with additional details if that's also the direction of the council. But I think that process is more staff time, whether it's HDL or the city, on that verification and how that data is kept. But I think that direct correlation with the promise not to raise rents is a little easier for us to get out. The original intent of the conversation on how to make housing more affordable, staff is under the impression that we are coming back on multiple times to have this conversation with the council. Sounds like the next year is going to be potentially filled with a lot of those conversations. In your strategic plan item, for example, SB2 grant funds streamlines how housing production happens more quickly, which lowers overall costs. And I know Jeff's on the call if he wants to provide an update on that, or if council wants him to. So I think there are a number of ways we can go about it. But Moises, Marie, if council supports this idea, we have enough direction to come back with a program, or even implement a program if that's the council's desire. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, my concern would be, I wouldn't want this to create more cost to the city in terms of staff time, that whatever process or procedure is developed, that the onus is on the property owner and not on the city to chase papers or chase people.
I think we'd have the ability to amend an application for this type of business, which someone could certify as to yes or no if rents were raised, and they'd be applicable for a waiver of their fees. That in and of itself would not be would not be too much staff work.
And unless I'm mistaken, Adam, we're taking an overall look at the business license application and process right now with HDL anyway, correct?
Yes. Marie, do you mind providing a little update on where we're at?
Sure. We recently went through the entire ordinance from 1978. And overall, from a tax structure standpoint, it's not a Prop 218, but any major changes to our ordinance would have to go out to a general election. But we are evaluating some of the items that may increase revenue. For example, if a new business opens up, they don't know what the gross receipts are going to be, so they make a rough estimate. Our current ordinance gives us the ability to go back and do a true up and ask for what the first year's gross receipts were, so we can collect any remaining balance due to the city. But it's about enforcement as well, and the city council's taste for how much you want us to enforce the the ordinance and see how far we want to go. And as Adam had said, being a business friendly community, we have always been less on the enforcement and relying on the honor system. But as we move forward and there becomes more demands on the services we provide, from streets to public safety and maintenance and landscaping to keep the city aesthetically beautiful so that businesses can continue to thrive, we'll have to reevaluate those amounts again.
I move to continue this topic to the April 12th meeting. Staff has enough information now to try to get some things together, if it's workable or not, and staff can work with Gary on some of the nuances on this and then bring it back to the council on the 12th.
I appreciate that, Michael, but I'm not 100% sure that we need, at this point, the request was just to give direction. And I believe that we've done that. Do we need a motion and a vote, Adam or Bill, or?
I think a motion and vote would be helpful. If you would like us to implement that program, we definitely have enough direction. And if I can just quickly summarize, it would be for there to be a certification process for any rental, both single family or multifamily, whereby the business license fees and associated tax would be waived if there is a certification that rent was not raised year over year. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yes.
If you'd like us,
I'll second.
So there's no second to Councilmember Alawas's motion. So
well,
Mayor
I
Pro Tem
seconded
is
it.
the state.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
you
believe
did?
Mendel did
Okay.
second it.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. All right,
So
well,
is-
then that's a substitute motion that if Councilmember Boyer is echoing what the city manager said, we can make that a motion and see if there's a second to that motion.
Well, I believe our motions are similar. The only difference is April 12th enough time?
yeah.
Yes, okay. Then I'm not making a motion. I think Michael's motion was taken.
Okay. So I think we're ready to vote on the motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded.
Yes, a motion by Councilmember Alabas, a second by Councilmember Thompson. I believe it's to implement a program by April 12th for certification process for any rental, single or multifamily, whereby license fees would be waived if rent was not increased year by year. I'll take a roll call vote.
I don't think that is the motion.
No,
I think the motion was to continue this item to April the 12th to bring back a program that
I
would
see.
accomplish the goals you've just
I
articulated.
see. Okay, so to
That's
protect
correct.
council on April 12th for a
Yes.
program. Okay,
Correct.
that's how it'll be noted then in the minutes. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, then I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes,
and Mayor Davis.
Yes,
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
thank you. That takes us to item 12, consideration of Senate Bill 843, renters tax credit. And tonight to report on that, once again, Assistant City Manager Lopez, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. As Mayor Davis mentioned, the item before you this evening is a request to consider Senate Bill 843, which, if approved by the legislature, would increase the tax credit for qualified renters up to $1,000 for a defined period of time. The renter's tax credit was first established in 1972 and has not been increased since 1979. Qualified renters are currently eligible to receive tax credit totaling $120 for spouses or heads of household and $60 for other individuals, subject to some income thresholds that are adjusted annually for CPI. The proposed increase to $1,000 or $500 would account for inflation related increases from the time it was last increased in 1979. So it would true up that tax credit. This is not the first time that this bill or this similar concept has been introduced by the legislature. This is the second time in recent years where the legislature has considered it. This particular iteration has quite a bit of bipartisan support for members in the legislature. It is currently been introduced, and there have been some procedural votes for it, but it has not yet been assigned to a committee or referred directly for a floor vote. So we're keeping an eye on that, depending on the city council's position or direction this evening. With that, Mayor, I will turn it over for any questions that our council members may have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Okay, thanks, Karen. And again, as Moises shared, we may be a little bit early in the process of taking a position on this, but this has come up a couple of times in the past and it hasn't gotten any legs. And for me, it's sort of a no-brainer. The renters, for the most part, in this state are those who need the help the most. And increasing this renter's tax credit is a relatively simple process. And there's no additional taxes, there's no additional cost to the residents, whether it be of housing or anything else to offset this. This is a true tax credit from the state of California. So I ask that this be discussed now so that maybe we can start to push this so that this time around it can get some legs and the conversation can be moved forward. So that was my reason for wanting to bring this up now, plus the fact that we're discussing this and some other housing issues. I thought it was appropriate to make this request tonight. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendahl.
I support this effort, and it's time to help the people that need it the most. So absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alawas.
Thank you, Karen. Moises, is this the renters, the tax credit, is it go on forever, or is it a certain length of time? Is it help them get out of a certain position, or is there always renting? How long does this go on for?
It is for a defined period of time. So if it's approved by the legislature, the procedural votes that have been taken would make it effective immediately. So the time, the length of time that this tax credit would be in place is the period between January 2nd of this year and January 1st of 2027.
So it's for a semi-short duration.
For about 5 years.
So does it follow them if they move to another location?
Yes, it would follow them. If they remain a qualified renter under the tax code, then they would remain eligible for it.
So on a regular home, you pay property tax, and then you can write that off in your federal taxes, but you can't write it on your state taxes. And there are some folks that are in single family homes that, are on challenging times as well. They're not renting, but they're challenging times as well. So I have a little problem with this because it's not equitable as far as individual homeowners versus renters. Some people just prefer to rent and not own. So they're getting the tax credit based on what? Is there any parameters? Can they get it? Is it based on income?
It is based on income level, sir.
Oh, okay. So do you know what is it? Isn't it something like 80% of the median?
For calendar year 2020 or a tax year 2020, the franchise tax board set the two income levels. So for spouses who file joint returns or heads of household, the income limit was established or set at $87,066. For every other individual or single individuals, that income threshold was $43,533.
Okay. And so this is basically for a set duration unless it's extended.
That's correct.
All right. No other questions?
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
I would agree with what Gary has said. David has said it well. I certainly concur that we should support this. It's a crying shame that it hasn't been looked at since the 70s. So I'm fully supportive of acting on this. Thank you.
Yes, speaking of the 70s, I noted when Director Rishi mentioned that some of the things had not been reviewed since 1978. I was going to note there are many on this call right now who were not born in until after 1978. So
That is true.
wow, yes.
About moistness like that.
So do we have a motion for item 12?
I would move that the Glendora City Council takes a position of support of SB 843 and writes letters to the appropriate representatives.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Boyer, Mayor Pro Tem Boyer, a second by Councilmember Alawas. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes us to unfinished business. Item 14, update on the strategic plan, February 2022, and City Manager Raymond.
Good evening again. Next slide, please. Just a really quick recap. In July 2020, the City Council, its members of boards and commissions and city staff met to discuss a 3-year strategic plan. The overall overwhelming conversations at that point centered around the recovery from COVID and incorporating the proposed strategic plan with the city's 2-year budget to ensure what gets funded gets done. Next slide, please. After that, a discussion of more than 200 items that were talked about at the meeting. Staff came forward with a final version of the strategic plan that incorporated more than 50 goals and objectives, or 50 tasks and objectives amongst the goals that were adopted. Updates were provided to the City Council in March 2021, in June through the budget process, and most recently in November of 2021. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder of what our overarching goals are. It's increasing financial stability, enhancing and modernizing the organization, improving and maintaining the city's infrastructure and facilities, implementing strategic economic development, enhancing employee development and retention, and implementing strategic homeless solutions. Next slide, please. With some changes along the way and the addition of objectives and tasks, currently there are 57 assigned. I mean, there were originally 57. We currently have a total of 62 objectives and tasks. 8 of them are financial related, 26 are related to modernization of the organization, 10 are related to infrastructure, 6 to economic development, 9 to city employees, and 3 to homelessness. Next slide, please. Based on City Council feedback, the update before you this evening in attachment A to this item is slightly modified. In addition to the detailed list of all the objectives and the status of where they're at, staff has created a summary page, more similar to previous updates the council received under past strategic plans. This includes a list of all items, the status, if it's been completed, if it's currently in progress, or if it's not been started. We show increments, a completion of 10% from 0 to 100, 100 being fully complete. We included change from the previous update. So here you are receiving changes from the November update to February for that quarter. And then we also just include a reminder of funding status. It's either fully funded, partially funded, or not funded. You still get the detailed report. If you have questions about any of the items, you look on the corresponding strategic plan number and can see a more detailed update of that item. Next slide, please. Currently, of the 62 objectives and tasks, 42 items have shown progress have been made. 5 items were unchanged, and to date, 15 of the tasks or objectives have been completed. Next slide, please. Some highlights, not a exhaustive list, but updates by type or by goal. The city has been successful in recapturing the lost COVID-19 revenues. We currently this evening have a couple items, including the Sierra Madre Landscape District analysis. We'll have that for your consideration this evening. And previously, the City Council approved our water rate and infrastructure study and analysis. Next slide, please. The city's communication strategic plan is underway. The City Council has updated its boundaries for districts and moved the elections to the presidential cycle, which is in November, to ensure all 5 elections happen in November of every other year. Citizens Academy, specifically for the police department, have been restarted. We are updating our every 2 or 3 year community survey, currently working with our third party, a consultant, on updating the community survey. And the short-term rental program was reevaluated for changes after the initial adoption via emergency ordinance. Next slide, please. Also included on the modernization, both the ERP and land development systems that are permitting system are currently issued and or under development. In addition, the city, we contemplated a sunshine ordinance where we tried to publish the materials further in advance than the required 72 hours. And staff's been pretty successful at both the city council and a committee level of late of trying to publish about a week in advance. Next slide, please. On infrastructure, the city council of the last 3 months has had pretty significant conversations on the capital improvement plan process and enhancements. Staff has been remarkably successful at gathering almost $7 million in funding for the People Movement project that didn't exist previously. And it's currently underway and due in early March is the historic streetlight assessment, which will provide some preliminary design and detailed cost estimates. Next slide, please. Additionally, Gladstone Park and Splash Pad is underway. The project has been revised in scope to include the parking lot and the removal of the water tank, the expansion of the parking lot there. With the current status of the drought, the splash pad will be put on hold for a period of time until we can reconsider that option. Next slide, please. Economic development, the city's housing element was resubmitted for a second round of review. We've recently received comments on that second round. Additionally, the SB2 planning grant for expediting both housing and process is also currently underway. Next slide, please. The city has continued through its human resources division to significantly improve recruitment efforts during COVID-19. Additionally, the entire United States is currently under what's being termed as the Great Recession, where we actually sent several quarterly records in the United States for people leaving the workforce. And we continue to find alternative ways to attract and recruit staff and retain the staff that we have. Next slide, please. On homelessness, we've gone through the process of trying to engage our other local agencies in a sub-regional housing process. And we recently completed our own point in time count. There is a LASA point in time count this evening that staff and volunteers are participating in, but the city engaged a third party to try to get more granular detail on our homeless population to help the city council with future policy decisions on that front. And staff also provided testimony, the first city in Los Angeles County to provide testimony to the Blue Ribbon Commission on Homelessness that is being run at the County of Los Angeles. Next slide, please. So some items for future city council consideration based on some feedback. Just a quick reminder that a long-term strategic plan allows for integration into the budget process and staff work plans from a staffing level. What gets funded gets done. And when you incorporate the strategic plans and initiatives with the department heads and then who incorporate them through their employees, what gets documented at a staff level gets worked on timely. Items for city council consideration as we move forward with this longer term strategic planning process is If the city council wants to adopt a strategic planning policy, potential items for consideration would be, do you want to look at a formal process for adding and removing items that are on the list, process to reevaluate goals and objectives, individual council member requests when they arise to the portion or position that they're going to take up considerable time and or potential resources, the frequency of goal and objective reviews. These are 3-year goals. Do we want to look at changing that process to shorter? And then is there any look at a documented process for review of mission statement, vision statement, and core values? Next slide, please. As always, you can visit the city's website for an update of the strategic plan. This item will be added to the website after the conversation this evening. And happy to answer, staff's on the call as well, to answer the status of any item and or listen to any feedback from the council on if you'd like to change the process. And with that, Mayor, turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I have several, I guess, things to say. I'll try to keep them short because of the urgency to move things along. But I really am thankful for the summary. I think it's well done. It says what, kind of where we are. The public can see exactly what's being done, the 57 objectives. Everything is just laid out there. I'm very pleased that funding is given to most of these goals. And I think that speaks well to what our city's doing, the financial health that we're in. Thirdly, I really would caution us to make any significant change in any of this, because I believe that it's very important that we've synced up our goals that we've agreed on with what our budget is. And whenever you change one of those, there's a barbell, and the barbell goes up or down, and it's usually not a good thing. And I think that to achieve the 57 objectives that we have is a noble goal. I'm very pleased to see that that most of these are being done. I'm happy to see that when there is a need, such as the hoodlums that took apart Finkbeiner Park restrooms, that we have the ability to respond, because again, the health that our city has, to be able to amend that and incorporate a very rapid response to make sure that our bathrooms are done, and then even more is done. So I am really looking forward to our next planning adventure, and I think the last one was done well. There was a broad base of consensus, a broad base of people that they gave a lot of good input. And I think that with the roadmap that we have now, we should stay with it. Again, it's synced up with what our budget is, our spending goals, our revenue goals are. And so I think that these are good. And it certainly appears that on many of these things, we're going to get them done. So I don't have any other things to talk about. I know that David and I spent extensive time today talking about this, and any questions that I had were answered then. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedendahl.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I echo many of Mendel's thoughts. We planned our work. We need to work our plan. I'm a firm believer if we're constantly changing it, we'll just upset staff, and as far as what are we trying to get accomplished. So let's work our plan. We have adapted and adjusted when short terms came up and we needed something done. They've been most flexible. So let's reward that, but not change anything. Thank you for the report. It's very clear, and it's nice to see the successes and the progress. So I look forward to continuing those reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alawas.
Thank you, Karen. Adam, thank you for the report and the update. We've had ongoing conversations on council added agenda items or council requested items. And you stated in there succinctly what gets funded gets done. Where's the demarcation line on that when you have a council related item that wants to be taken care of? But what's the demarcation line of having to put it on the strategic plan? For instance, let's say if Mendel wants a no parking sign in front of his house, is that something that has to be on a strategic plan? Or is that something that you can just handle through staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've taken a look at through here, every council member has had various asks or requests, or can we look at doing X, Y, and Z? And I think to the extent possible, there is no rule of thumb of this takes 100 hours. From a dollar perspective, obviously anything over $25,000, the council has to agree to do something like that. So an easy line of demarcation is 25,000 for council approval, but not necessarily raising to the status of we need to change our strategic plan. So if something's going to take significant resources in both staff time and dollars, that would be a discussion that we would ask the council, if that council member is interested in something, to receiving a second, having that discussion at the city council level like we do now. And then if there's going to be some significant resources, we would add it to the strategic plan, honestly, to ensure it gets done. So the line of demarcation, I would say, is substantial resources, difficult to define, other than I would tell you, if staff has to stop a lot of what they're doing and work on that item specifically, that would sort of be the line. If it's requesting staff participate in a community meeting or something like that, that would not rise to that level, obviously. But again, we've tried to be as proactive as we can in addressing community-wide issues when they arise, and looking at the strategic plans and other things we're working on to see if it's part of one of those items.
So what we've been working on in the past, there has been some situations where things have been added to the strategic plan because it rose to that certain level. Any idea of how many items have been added to that strategic plan since the original strategic plan was done?
5.
Okay. All right. All the questions. Thank you very much for the update. I appreciate it.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
No, I believe we need to stay the course. We got a plan in place and we need to keep working it. The one request I would have is that when we talk about having a formal process to add or remove items from the strategic plan, I would like to just make sure that as we receive our quarterly updates, that we make sure that any items that are added or removed are actually pointed out and acknowledge that there's a reason for something being added or removed. But that would be my only request. But besides that, I think we're doing a pretty good job, and staff's done a great job moving us forward.
I appreciate that, Mayor Pro Tem. Staff's only added items to the plan, some of which were the ERP and planning systems that council approved the RFP. So any discussion would happen at a council meeting for any item that was added or removed from the plan. And then we would be happy to highlight that at any quarterly update as a reminder for what changed. Absolutely.
So council wasn't the culprit then, huh?
Sure. Let's go with that.
Well, to follow up on your example though, about community meeting, like you said, a community meeting wouldn't take a lot of resources.
Right.
But I think if there were multiple community meetings, that I think then, it starts to compound. So using that example, if it was anything else, that I think we all need to be aware and not abuse staff time and resources. So.
Yeah, I would use a perfect example of that, Mayor, is when we had the short-term rental conversation. We had the initial community meeting that staff jumped on with 2 members of the council and then came back to the council for direction pretty immediately. So that is sort of the process that we would look if there were going to be changes or a lot of staff or resources on that endeavor.
Right. All right. Thank you very much for that report. And Do you need a receive and file motion?
Yes, please, but I think we're good on direction.
Okay, very good. So
So
is
move to
there a
receive
motion
and
to
file.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Alawas, second by Councilmember Friedendahl to receive and file the report. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson. Is he on? Did we lose him?
No, he's on.
Oh, you're muted?
I'm sorry.
we
Yes,
go.
I was muted. Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes,
That passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
thank you. That takes us to item 15, update on landscape maintenance District 1 ballot potential. And Andrea Miller to report. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm here tonight to provide an update on the potential ballot proceedings of 4 zones previously detached from the Landscape Maintenance District 1. At the December 14th, 2021 council meeting, staff presented initial information regarding a potential ballot proceeding. Council subsequently directed staff to conduct additional historical research on these zones and return with additional information. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just a quick recap. These are the survey results. We had these the last time as well. Staff contracted Wildan Financial Services to conduct a survey by mail of the property owners in the 4 zones listed below. This survey was to determine the probable interest in balloting to consider rejoining the district, as well as establishing a new levy cost. This slide details the information that was taken from each zone's returned surveys. The number of return surveys was low, with an average response rate of approximately 34%. These tables were also in your staff report. The additional information requested by council at the December 14th meeting includes inception of the zones, ownership of the parcels, estimate cost to renovate these areas, and the estimate cost to fund the ongoing maintenance if they were to rejoin the district. Next slide, please. First one up is West Sierra Madre. Again, the entire yellow area are the properties within the zone, and the top green line is the landscaped area. This tract was built in 1976. Council approved the tract with the developer granting the city a landscape easement, which the developer also agreed to include as part of the maintenance district. Although we have an easement, the landscaped area belongs to the 12 property owners that abut the landscape. So each lot owns a portion of landscape maintenance directly behind their property. So these would be considered private lots. Estimated cost to renovate this landscaped area is $45,000. The proposed annual zone cost for 1819 was $8,667, which at the time there was a deficit of $2,969. The annual levy in 1819 was $55.86, and the proposed levy in 1819 was $84.97. With the updated cost for landscape maintenance, now we're looking at an annual levy cost of $9,600 with an individual lot cost of $94.12. Next slide, please. Okay, next we have Bannon Arrow. This tract was built in 1975. The developers granted the 2 lots to the city in fee simple. Council passed a resolution accepting the lots and ordering the annexation of these lots to the existing maintenance district. Based on these information, these are city lots as well as the 2 sites, 2 green areas located at the bottom of the map. We received an estimate to renovate at a cost of approximately $33,000. The annual proposed amount in 1819 was $57.37 with a deficit of $22.71. The maximum at the time in 1819 was $43.32, and we're proposing an increase to $71.71. If we were to go out to ballot, the estimated annual levy, including the landscape maintenance cost would be $6,400 with an individual lot cost of $80 annually. Next slide, please. This is Craigmont, which includes the two medians on the north end of the street. This tract was built in 1988. The condition of approval required that these two medians be annexed into the district and that the improvements be consistent with improvements to the medians that are to the south. There are three medians to the south. At the time of construction, the medians to the south were landscaped. However, in the late 1990s, they were hardscape was installed, cobblestone was installed. These two medians are city-owned, as are the ones to the south. We provided two renovation costs, or two costs for everything. One being if we wanted to re-landscape it how it was prior, which is $12,000, or if we'd like to go with the hardscape matching the ones to the south, and that would be $17,000. Annual total cost, excuse me, proposed cost in 1819 was $53.85, with the maximum, at the time, a maximum annual levy of $45.77. We proposed at that time a levy of $192.32. You can see below the cost as far as the annual cost and levy based on whether we want to landscape or hardscape these two medians. Next slide, please. Okay, last up is Greenfield Court. This tract was built in 1987. The developers requested that the two areas at the entrance to the development be landscaped and placed in the district. They dedicated the easement to the city for landscape maintenance purposes and granted the lots to the city in fee simple. These lots are considered city-owned. The proposed annual zone cost for 1819 is $4,232. Sorry, I forgot the renovation cost we received was $24,000. The annual levy was $141.58, and the proposed levy of 1819 was $248.96. And then below that is what the current levy would be if we chose to go out to bid or to ballot now, and then the annual levy of $276.47 per lot. Next slide, please. So if we were to move forward with the balloting, under Prop 213, the city must do the below in order to increase any assessments. We need to give written notice to all property owners within the zones no less than 45 days prior to the public hearing. We need to hold and declare the results of the ballot at the hearing and hold a public hearing, I'm sorry, and then declare the results at the balloting at that hearing, excuse me. Depending on the number of ballots, it would either be during that time or, as we did last time, we went away at the beginning of the meeting and came back before the end of the meeting with the ballot totals. Below is the cost from Wildan for the balloting and the meetings which they would be doing with us. Next slide, please. So recommendation is that City Council provide direction on which zones to conduct a Prop 218 assessment, district ballot proceeding, and secondly, to authorize the Administrative Services Director to make the necessary budget appropriations. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Friedendahl.
Okay.
That's why I called on you first.
Yeah, I figured that.
Started with some fun.
Yeah, there you go. Andrea, thank you for that great report. Curiosity question, with the Greenfield development being the last one built in town that has this, all those home properties, and there aren't that many, so that's pretty easy. They all get to see it every day when they go in and out. So it's in their face. In their purchase agreement of their home, was it stipulated in CC&Rs or something that, hey, you got to maintain this or it's going to happen for you? Do you know that?
Yes, it was part of the CCNRs. It was part that it was in the landscape district at the time.
Okay, so
when
it's
they
no
purchased their
surprise
home.
to them today that they have that obligation.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have a feel for if any of, and I'll still use that one as an example, if anyone there is complaining about its condition?
Yeah, we have received complaints. I actually received a call from one of the residents a week or two ago asking about, our surveys. And she did say that she would be interested in actually going out and campaigning to get everybody back on board. So we haven't heard much in a while, but when we first dissolved it, we did.
So there is some interest in making it different. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know. I look at the cost that you've presented of restorations. And I don't know, at some point we'll have to do something to make them look better than they do, or make them stop being a maintenance challenge. If we restore them and then we charge the annual fee, let's say it was a successful ballot, we're just covering our fees. So we never really get our restoration charges collected. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah, that would be something else that we'd need to discuss,
Yeah,
how
that's
you'd like to go about that.
A lost fix. Okay. Because some of the others, obviously, they're probably not making noise, or they're not tired of looking at it because they don't go out and take care of it. So I'm wondering if we did, you mentioned the timeline for the ballot, and based on the proposition of why it drags out so long. I asked a question this morning, why should the ballot process take 5 months? That's just me hanging myself. I can't handle the pace of things, but okay. But I'm wondering, is it possible that if we do a ballot and we say a no return ballot is a yes vote, can we do that? Maybe Mr. Winder can share on that. I don't know.
I would have
The rule is a majority protest. So a no vote, a failure to vote, it has the effect of being a yes vote, but you have to achieve a certain threshold in order to reinstate.
Yeah, it's also by a weighted, so an average of whatever the total is. So we don't have too many disparate property owners. Let's say, Councilman, that it was a 3-property district, but one owner encompassed more than 50% of the estimated charge. That would be the one owner that would have to vote yes. If they voted no, it'd be dead. So I think there is some of that.
So not all votes are equal.
This is not a classic one man, one vote type arrangement.
Okay.
It's just weighted based on percentage of ownership in property.
Well, for example, the Sierra Madre one, as Andrea shared, 12 properties abut that, and the rest of the neighborhood can ignore it and doesn't even see it or bother with it. So that's a tough one. All right. So here's what I'm wondering. If we were to not spend the money to do a ballot, but spend the money to restore them, and spend it as cheaply and bulletproof hardscape as possible. And I used the term this morning, but you see on hillsides that are up in Big Dalton Canyon's our closest one I can think of, to keep the hillside in place. The county went in and just shot it with gunite and covered it. It's sort of decorative. It's got some color to it, and it's not going anywhere. It's a one and done thing. I'm wondering, for the cost of restoration in each of these places, can we go in, grade it, blast it, and call it done, and say, you got what you asked for, folks. You won't do anything, so we did it to you. Is that a possibility?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm guessing, I don't know what Shotcrete costs. I may be out of my mind, and it's impossible to pay for. Who knows? But it could be done, and then it can have variations. It doesn't have to be pretty like finished concrete and all those labor intensive things. But Just throwing out an idea there. Scrape it and shoot it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Alawas.
Thank you, Karen. Great job, Andrea. I really appreciate it. Sorry to see coming back to you to have to do some more work. But my original thought process is this: the folks entered into an agreement that's been grandfathered down to them. It's not the overall taxpayers' responsibility to maintain these areas. And so I'm prepared to make a motion, but I'll let everybody else have their piece or talk about this. But I believe on page 198 of our report, it shows the percentage of folks that are willing to pay to have this addressed. And I think it's only zone 3 that the overwhelming majority was no. The rest were on the positive side. The higher percentage was on yes. Is that correct?
You are looking at, sorry, zone 3.
I think zone 3 is the only one that was overwhelmingly no. The rest were yes.
Yeah, and I think there are two things at play there, council member, is one, surveys mailed and surveys returned. Whether that's an indication of how they would vote in the ballot too is anyone's best guess. So you have that variable in there as well, where if there was a public campaign that more people would actually return a vote in the affirmative, there's also the risk that more people would return a vote in the negatory. So
absolutely, you never know.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't believe it's the overall taxpayer's responsibility to maintain private property in a sense. I mean, yes, they went into agreement, we took it over, and I hope we never, ever, ever do that again.
Well, you talked about Prop 218 earlier. This is a direct result of Prop 218.
Right. I hope, though, that we never take over a piece of property like that and agree to maintain it based on an agreement. So is that correct so far, that zone 3 is based on that slice in time?
You're talking about Craigmont, council member?
Whatever, is that zone 3?
Yeah, Bannon Arrow.
Bannon, yeah.
Oh, Bannon Arrow. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
Okay. Again, I'm ready to make a motion, but I'll let the others pipe in.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Well, I want to commend staff that, Andrea's got the patience of Job. This has been a ongoing issue ever since I know Gary and I were elected. I'll just keep it short. I'm not opposed to what Michael's saying, but I would certainly support what David has said. Scrape and spray, and let's be done with this. But I am not going to oppose one last try of a vote. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Andrea, I do appreciate all the work you guys have put into this, but I've got to ask, has there been any conversation, especially on the properties on Banna and Arrow? If you look at it, we've got a property owner at 1747 Banna that this property is adjacent to them, and also at 320 and 326 Carter. Has there been any conversation about just giving this land to the neighbors? And then it becomes their issue. It's no longer an entrance to the neighborhood. It becomes somebody's backyard. We have that same opportunity on Greenfield. It's 1403 Bonnie Cove and then 436 East Gladstone. Those are the homeowners that live right there. And if they just move their fences a little bit, they could assume this property, and then it would no longer be an entrance of sorts. It would just be somebody's backyard. Has that even been a conversation that's been discussed before?
I do recall, those discussions taking place for Bannon Arrow and the property owners not being interested. However, on Greenfield Court, there was one of the property owners adjacent to it who had expressed interest in purchasing one of the lots at some time. So that could be an option over there. But the other two at the time, Ban and Arrow, weren't interested.
Okay, did we talk to them about purchasing them, or did we talk to them about giving it to them? Or are we even allowed to do that?
I don't recall if it was purchasing or giving. It was just would they be willing to have it was the basic discussion, and there was no interest at that time.
So gifting the property would depend on the nature of our legal interest. If our interest is an easement, then the best we could do would be abandon that easement, and then the property would revert to the abutting property owners up to some point in time. If we own the property in fee, we could gift it, but then you've got a gifting problem. So,
Bill, would any of the state's provision on surplus land come into play here?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. We'd have to look at it. Yeah, could you just, right?
Mayor Pro Tem, it has been a discussion among staff on how to find the easiest way out of this, including telling people, hey, look, your yard gets bigger. I think that would be an easy way out for us. And I know when it first failed, when I first arrived here, soon after the failure, that staff did go out and canvass and knocked on some doors to inquire about that. But essentially, there was an overwhelming jumping up and down to do so at that point.
Okay.
Nobody wanted a bigger backyard.
At least it was discussed. I would support having that conversation again, but at this point, I'm ready to support trying this one more time. Although we say one more time, if it fails again, I'm sure this will come up again in the future. But I'm not so sure I'd be supportive of shooting gunite over it, because that's part of our community, and I'd like to try to keep it as attractive as we possibly can. So that's just my 2 bits. Thank you.
So Gary, I think we did that originally. I believe 2 or 3 properties we were able to novate over to the property owners abutting that. And I'm not sure about if we did it across the board or not at the time.
Well, we did it with a couple of properties where it was the property owner actually owned the property, but it was part of the agreement that it was maintained not by the property owner. So we just gave those back to the people that actually owned the property.
Right.
Okay, this is a different story. We own this property. I'm pretty sure this is owned by the City of Glendora, fee simple ownership. And so it's our responsibility. It's just they have, the homeowners have an agreement to maintain them. And just to answer David's question, when you asked about whether or not this was disclosed to people when they moved in, yeah, I'm sure it was on page 846 of all the disclosures that we're required by law to give to homeowners today when they buy a piece of property. So
yeah,
I'm sure it was
the realtor's fault. Now we know.
And equally important, the law presumes you've read all those 800 pages.
Exactly. So yes, it was probably in there. Did anybody understand it? I doubt if the people living there today understood it when they bought their home. So anyway, that's my 2 bits. Thanks.
Well, if there is some way that we could put a bow on this, that if there's a strong desire to ask one more time, but maybe some compromise added to that, maybe not the gunite, but some hardscape feature or some way that we could keep this from continuing to be a burden to Andrea and to the rest of her staff, that we could not keep bringing it back. So that's what I would suggest from my colleagues.
From a procedural standpoint, if those 4 areas agreed to be part of a district again, probably be easier for staff all the way around, because of the Sierra Madre and the private property issue there is a little more difficult for us to address from an enforcement standpoint. Staff is happy to give it the college try one more time, meet with those 4 areas. We're really familiar with them. And if that process of about 15,000 didn't pass, we could look at potentially trying to work with homeowners to assume that property and work with Bill on the surplus property potential issue at the state of California in that process. And if all else fails, looking at a hardscape option.
So will tiny homes fit on those pieces of property?
Under SB 9, I believe not. I don't.
On Sierra Madre, yes.
Yeah, hammocks.
So I move to instruct staff to conduct a Prop 218 ballot process, giving landscape zones 2, 3, 11, and 15 the opportunity to rejoin necessary budget adjustments.
I'll second that.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Alawas and a second by Councilmember Friedendahl. I will take a roll call vote.
Just to ask a clarifying question. So is that we do not want to make one last attempt to have that conversation
I believe
Conversation.
with the homeowners about acquiring the property, or
I
no,
think
we just want to
Adam-
go straight to the ballot initiative?
straight to the ballot. I think Adam said that if it wasn't going to make it, they would reach out to the property owners as a last ditch effort. Is that correct, Adam?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and then also to authorize the Administrative Services Director to make necessary budget appropriations for it. So I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, for your, as Councilmember Thompson said, your patience of Job as you continue to work through this. Hopefully we'll come to an end with this soon and find some resolution.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, this takes us to item 16, new business, consideration of the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. And City Clerk Communications Director Sussman.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. The report before you tonight is to consider a request received by the League of California Cities for the council to adopt a resolution in opposition of Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, also known as AG 210042A1. Back in 2018, the Tax Fairness, Transparency, and Accountability Act, Amendment number 1 was circulated to qualify for a ballot measure in November 2018. Due to some opposition, it was actually withdrawn from the ballot in June of 2018. The measure before you, or the initiative before you tonight, is a similar initiative and is being basically a reintroduction of that initiative. This initiative would pose significant challenges to the city's financial stability. In the wake of many concerns related to this initiative, Cal Cities, the Board of Directors, have voted unanimously to oppose the proposed initiative, have joined a coalition of public safety, labor, local governments, and infrastructure advocates to fight against the measure, and is strongly requesting that cities adopt a resolution opposing the proposed initiative to demonstrate how harmful this measure would be to the Glendora community and the people of the state of California as a whole. Proponents of this initiative have until April 29th, 2022 to submit enough signatures to the Secretary of State to qualify for the November 2022 ballot. A sample resolution has been prepared opposing the initiative, and additional facts and analysis were attached as part of the staff report. I'm available to answer any questions you might have at this point. We request the council give us direction on either to move forward with the sample resolution or provide different direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson?
I would support what city staff is asking us. I think this is a onerous expression of overreach by our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendahl?
Yeah, I support the resolution in opposition.
Councilmember Alawas?
Kathleen, can you dive into this a little bit further, exactly what the impediments are with this bill? Because I read through it and I have more questions than answers.
According to the California,
Go ahead.
according to the California cities, the initiative, if placed on the ballot and passed by the voters, will create constitutional loopholes that can limit voting input. It could require us to adopt new and stricter rules for raising taxes and fees and make it more difficult for the state and local law violators to be held accountable for impacts they have on our local communities. One of the examples that Marie provided in the staff report under the fiscal impact is that the initiative the long-term impact would weaken our local control, and it would jeopardize the city's ability to provide our services with critical infrastructure to residents. A lot of the fees, such as nuisance abatement charges, finance fee, franchise fees, document processing fees, and facility use fees, would be subject to new standards that could cause threats of litigation.
So
I'm sorry, Councilmember Alawas, you cut out, or I cut out.
No, I believe it's the councilman who's frozen.
Yeah, his screen's frozen.
okay, I'm back.
Okay, there you are.
There I are. Did you get that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, take two. So with the fees that we have currently in place, would that affect the current ones, or would that affect new ones that we would put in place?
The answer to that question would be yes. So in one aspect, this initiative would repeal past actions by cities through 2020. It would cause an issue, for example, if the city were to work with the county and LAFCO to incorporate certain county islands. If that was the task, those areas would have to agree by vote to have the same tax structure as the rest of the agency, especially in the general fund taxes, for example. It would require certain fees and initiatives, including emergency response fees that are annually increased, to be set via vote. So essentially, cities would have to bear the costs of elections to increase annual revenues to some extent. The initiative's also clumsily written and would potentially open us up to a lot of litigation, not just this city, but many others. Essentially, it's a fairly broad overreach to try to undo some of the past actions retroactively.
Who's the sponsor of this?
It is I think Howard Jarvis, but I'm not sure if they're
The California Business Roundtable.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer?
Wow. Okay. There is no way I could support us taking a position of opposing this initiative. You know, one of the things that we're dealing with, and I understand it's not a very well-written initiative, and it's going to end up in court if it happened to get passed. And it is going to cause some complications for us as a city. But the bottom line is the residents of the state of California have spoken multiple times about their concerns in the state of us being overtaxed. And we're in a situation where the state continues to try to figure out ways to find loopholes to get around raising the cost of living in California. And it's become absurd. I mean, it has become absolutely ridiculous what we pay in taxes. What this initiative would do is it would pull that back and basically try to fill in some of the loopholes that the state has found through Prop 218 and Prop 26. And again, one of the things that as a council member that I have to look at, I understand staff's position. You guys, Adam, your job is to run a business called the City of Glendora. And like any business manager, you're in a situation that we're constantly trying to find new revenue. I believe that especially the City of Glendora, our community is very supportive of things that make sense, but on a statewide level, things are completely out of hand. I wouldn't have been surprised if this didn't come up on our agenda tonight, that I may have been asking for us to take a position to support this initiative at some point in the future. But I don't like the idea of us being in conflict with what's best for our staff to continue to take care of our residents. So I would prefer that we make a decision to take no position, simply because this or some initiative like this needs to happen to pull back the reins on Sacramento to get them to stop adding more and more taxes onto us on an annual basis. So I can't support the request tonight, but I could support us taking no action or taking a neutral position on this, simply because I do understand where city staff and management is coming from, that the damage that something like this can do. But I also look at the people I represent and the damage that's being done to the residents of California day to day with the added taxes has to be stopped. At some point or another, it has to be stopped. So that's my 2 bits.
Okay, thank you. Well, I approach it from the angle that I want to do what I can to keep the City of Glendora whole and functioning the best that it can. And so for those reasons, I would be in support of opposing this initiative. So is there a motion to
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we take no position or neutral position on this particular initiative.
I'll second that.
Thank you. That is a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer, a second by Councilmember Alawas to take no position on this initiative. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
No.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
no?
And that fails 2-3.
Okay, so the motion, I mean, the matter's still before the council. Another motion would be in order if you want to make one.
Madam Mayor, I would move that we oppose the Taxpayer Protection Act as noted in our staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay. And moved in second.
Yes, that is a motion by Councilmember Thompson, a second by Councilmember Friedendahl to approve the opposition of Taxpayer Protection Act as recommended by staff. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
No.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
No.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes.
And that passes 3-2. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen and Adam, for presenting the information on that. That takes us to item 17, the Glendora Housing Authority Annual Report for fiscal year 2020 to 2021. And Housing and Economic Development Manager Velasquez to report. Welcome, Ms. Valerie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If we can go to the next slide, please. So a quick background, the redevelopment agencies, as they were dissolved in February 2012, the city formed a housing authority to serve as the governing body of the former agency's low and moderate income housing assets. The housing authority annual report is required per sections 343.28 and 341.76.1 of the Health and Safety Code. It is required to be submitted to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, and the report includes information on activity and a financial summary for the prior fiscal year. Next slide, please. So the activity of the Housing Authority is primarily administration, focusing on preserving and monitoring previously assisted low and moderate income housing projects, such as the Alwood Family Apartments, which is 87 units, all of which are for low income households. Also the Heritage Oaks Senior Apartments, which has 157 units, 52 of which are reserved for low income household units. And then there is one Habitat for Humanity project, which is a single family residence. In addition, the RDA issued affordable housing loans for the purpose of purchasing property or allowing low income households to do home improvements to their property. Some have been paid off already. As of now, there are 27 loans that are still within the portfolio from the prior RDA. Next slide, please. So the housing report also includes information on the Housing Authority's financials, taking information from Bay City's annual comprehensive financial report. On average, we've seen that the normal deposits or revenue that can be counted on is about $150,000 per year. But there are some occasional one-time revenues that skew that average upwards. So for example, in 2016, 2017, the Housing Authority had a deposit of approximately $1 million from the Heritage Oaks project. The agreement requires that 20% of proceeds they receive come to the Housing Authority. And in 2019, 2020, there was a $405,007 received and spent as part of the city's proportionate share of the city's pension obligation bonds. And the deposits are important, and we'll get to that in a minute. So I wanted to just kind of give you an idea of what skews that average upwards. And then expenditures primarily, as mentioned, are for activity, which is the administration of the Housing Authority monitoring. Next slide, please. So the report also takes a look at something called excess surplus. And excess surplus is defined as the unencumbered amount in the fund that exceeds the greater of either $1 million or the aggregate deposits over the prior 4 fiscal years, whichever is greater. So the table that we have here shows you what the deposit in, or the balance in that fund was at the end of the 2019 year, 2020 year, and 2021. And each of those years, the aggregate deposits for the prior 4 years was greater than $1 million. So we used that aggregate amount subtracted from the fund balance to find the excess surplus. So you'll see the excess surplus in 2019 was approximately $550,000. In July 1st of 2020, it was $144,461. And then for the most recent ending fiscal year, it's $1,123,653. So excess surplus, they take a look at that. They want to see that we are spending funds in a timely manner. And so the funds are required to be spent within 3 fiscal years afterwards. So the 2019, tonight we'll also be asking council to discuss how we can encumber 550,503 by the end of this fiscal year, and we'll go into some options. So next slide, please. So the Health and Safety Code also provides specific ways in which we can spend excess surplus. And those options are the development of affordable housing, the transferring of funds to another housing successor, or there's an option of taking no action, in which case we would possibly need to return these excess surplus funds to HCD. In addition to how we spend these funds, the allocation of the low-income household brackets is also specifically listed out. So a minimum of 30% of that funding has to be allocated to households of an extremely low income. That's 30% or below the area median income. A maximum of 70% can be allocated to very low income households, 30 to 60%. And no more than 20% of the funding can be allocated to low-income households that are between 60 and 80% AMI. It further goes down to restrict how we spend these funds as far as senior housing. So a maximum of 50% of the units created can be restricted for senior housing. Next slide, please. So just kind of breaking it down a little bit further as to those options. When we talk about the development of affordable housing, we're looking at adding affordable housing options to the housing inventory. So some of those options for consideration may be land acquisition. That would be staff taking a look and exploring properties that may be good sites or candidates for an affordable housing project. That option and that cost would not only include the purchase price, but also relocating any tenants or people that currently live on that property, and possibly demolition costs. If that were the option we take once we acquire property, or at that same time, we'd start to solicit affordable housing builders that we could partner with to develop and operate the property. Affordable housing projects that are rented out require that there is a deed restriction of 55 years. That's the amount of time that that project has to be restricted to low-income households. Another option would be to purchase a couple of housing units for rental to low-to-income housing households. With the 550,000 to 1.1 million of excess surplus funds that we need to spend by 2024. We would probably be able to purchase maybe 1 to 2 housing units based on today's housing prices. We're probably looking at a condominium or townhome. In this case, we would contract with a nonprofit to operate the units for the required 55-year covenant period. Third option, which is not on here, but it is an option to consider, is to partner with, not to partner, but to provide financing in which the Housing Authority could provide construction financing for an affordable project to secure a long-term covenant. Currently, though, without an existing project that immediately would need the financing and the requirements, being able to spend and commit these funds in a timely manner might make this a difficult option. Next slide, please. So I wanted to stop and kind of just go a little beyond this report with the Housing Authority funds and let council know that in addition to the excess surplus funds that we have, should the option of an affordable housing project be something that you would like to consider, there are additional resources available. So it's not just the 1.1 million excess surplus that we're looking at, but we also have other housing resources. So the $1.1 million is the excess surplus that needs to be spent by 2024. But the Housing Authority Fund currently has a little over $2 million. In addition, we have an Affordable Housing Fund 285. That fund has about 1.1 million. And then there's also the PLHA funds, which are permanent local housing allocation funds that are available through SB2 and awarded through HCD. We have not applied for these funds, but each year we are appropriated a certain amount. And once we have a project, we can go ahead and apply for those funds. And so it would be reasonable to expect that sometime this year, if we did want to pursue this route, we would probably be able to apply and receive $457,000 approximately. So if an affordable housing project is something that council would like to consider, we would have approximately 3.6 million to allocate to that project. Next slide, please. So the other option is to transfer excess surplus to another housing successor. In this case, the Health and Safety Code would require a public hearing of both housing successors. Development should not be in a census tract with more than 50% of very low income households, unless it's within a half mile of a major transit stop. Development should not result in a reduction in the number of housing units or reduction in the affordability of housing units on that site. And the last bullet point may be a deterrent, as this would require that each successor have an adopted housing element that is accepted by HCD. Right now, most cities, as you all are aware, are working through that process, and most do not have a current adopted housing element accepted by HCD. Next option, please. Or next slide, please. Okay, and so the third option is to take no action at all, in which case the excess surplus would be subject to returning to HCD. As I mentioned, the amount that we need to take action on or no action, and it would be subject to returning, is the $550,503. And then by June 30th, 2024, an additional $573,000 approximately, for an aggregate total of $1.1 million. Next slide. So the recommendation this evening is that the Housing Authority receive and file the annual report, direct staff to forward the report to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and then consider the options about the excess surplus and direct staff on how we should program that excess surplus. And with that, I'll return it to council and be available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Valerie. Before I invite my colleagues to speak, I just wanted to ask clarification on that $550,000 by June of 2022. So that would not actually need to be spent, but at least be committed to a project by that date?
Correct. We would need to go ahead and commit that amount towards, again, one of those options, a project or transferring it or doing nothing at all. And it's subject to returning to HCD.
And even though we have not gotten final approval from them for this year, we could still spend that ourselves though, correct?
On one of the options. So if we wanted to encumber it towards a affordable project, that we can do.
Okay.
Unless I'm not understanding your question.
No, you are. No, that was my question. All right. Before I make any further comments, I'll go to my colleagues. Mr. Friedendahl.
Thank you, Valerie. Great program. Clearly, I'm not into giving money back to the state, so that's not a grand option. But I do like the opportunity of combining the excess surplus and seeing if we can't repurpose that. So the curiosity is there's a move about to try to repurpose some underutilized big box buildings and things like that. Is there any way that we could combine all of that, pool it with some of the funding opportunities you've also identified, and make a affordable housing unit or a program in town?
Well, if that's the direction of that we would be directed to do, we would certainly start to research and explore which properties might be something that we can go ahead and negotiate with the property owner and see if it's zoned for residential development, or if we're planning to go in that direction. That's something that staff, myself, as well as the planning department would start to explore.
Okay, so something like that might qualify for utilization of these funds?
That's what we would look into, yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. I have no more questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Thompson?
Well, I would echo what David just said. I certainly would support us to obviously get this filed. I also do not want to give it back to HCD. And I would like to see staff come back with options as to directing it, or being able to partnership or buy something by first part of April. Obviously, we have until end of June, but I think we need to have time to think about this, discuss it, pros and cons. And I think that the staff would be probably the best ones to, know what's out there that we could work with. So I certainly would support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alawas?
Thank you, Karen. Valerie, thank you for your report. There's a lot to unpack here. So we're dealing with $3.6 million overall, correct?
With the housing authority, we have 2 million, but if we take a look at all of our resources, there's 3.6 million. And again, possibly there may be other grants available, but I'm taking a look at what I know we can work with.
So over time, if we don't do anything, how much would revert back to HCD over time?
So, right. So this year we need to go ahead and encumber 550,000. And then by 2024, we're looking at 1.1 million. And actually it's 550, it would be 1.1 million total by June 30th, 2024. And then continuing, it just depends on what our deposits are. We don't know. That's why I mentioned the deposits are not always something we can project with accuracy.
So that's the 1.123653 number?
Correct, yes.
So if we were to build something or do anything, prevailing wages would be in place, correct?
Right. I mean, if we're looking at probably the demolition costs and construction costs, yes, that probably would fall into place.
Are there any opportunities such as like Heritage Oaks to increase that property, to add any extra additional units?
That's a good question. That may be possible since there are, the entire complex is not affordable. I don't know, we would have to look into that. But the requirement is that we add affordable units to the inventory. So that could be a possibility. I don't know for certain.
Do we know what percentage is affordable?
I do. I believe I had the number in one of my slides here. So it's 52 out of 157. So roughly 30% or so.
Okay. Is it also possible to use this money for low-income rental support?
No, not excess surplus funds. No, we have to add affordable housing units, excess surplus funds.
So let's say hypothetically you have Heritage Oaks or someone like Heritage Oaks that's already kind of in this space. If we were to grant the money to them, would they have to also pay a prevailing wage if it's government money?
Well, their units are already existing, so I don't believe there would be any.
But if they could add to it.
The council member, typically when someone acquires that sort of funding, a prevailing wage is required.
Okay.
But if you were to go back to that apartment complex and say, we want to buy from you 3 more of your apartments and make them affordable, there's no prevailing wage requirement there. We're talking new construction. The city of Rancho Palos Verdes is using a low-income housing nonprofit to help manage and use its excess surplus funds. That is an option that staff might want to look into as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, I was, while you were making your staff report, I was trying to dig out the name of the provider, and I can't seem to find it, but we've got a transaction that we're doing right now where someone sold a unit subject to an affordability covenant at market rate, and they're going to have to replace that unit, and then we're going to transfer that unit to a low-income housing provider who will then find a qualified owner to occupy the unit, and we'll make sure that the unit remains for low income for 55 years with the right of first refusal if that subsequent buyer elects to leave the property, so that the unit will remain affordable in perpetuity. So that's an interesting option.
So Bill, are you saying that, let's say, I'm using hypothetical Heritage Oaks, if we had perhaps 2 units, 3 units, and we use this money and we say, we're going to buy this as long, or put some agreement in place, we're going to pay for this agreement to keep this affordable for 55 years. Is that something is that what you're alluding to?
I've seen that done, yes.
Okay.
I've seen that done. You actually buy the unit, and you use your excess surplus housing money to make up the difference between the market rate for the house or for the unit and the affordability of the unit.
I think
I will just add, I'm sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I will just add that there is another restriction that I did mention for restricting to seniors. So if we were to buy one unit for a senior from Heritage, because that's a senior restricted project, we'd have to also buy one that was not restricted. We can have a maximum of 50% of units that we use this funds for to senior housing. Did you guys follow me?
It'd be nice. It'd be good to investigate that as well. I don't know if we're going to come to any agreement tonight or solution, but it'd be nice to kind of look at those options. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
First question, could these funds be allocated to the housing trust?
The housing trust.
I think he means the regional housing trust.
Yeah, at the San Gabriel Valley COG level.
It has to be a housing successor. So if the housing trust, if there's a housing successor that has a project within it, but so it has to be a housing successor. So the answer is no, it couldn't be given to the trust directly.
Okay. One of the things that, as we look at this with the June 30th, 2022 date lingering out there, we've got an issue just in general. For us to try to do something in that short a time frame is going to be extremely difficult. Would it be possible for these funds to be used for homeless housing that we have been talking about for a while, but we really haven't pulled the trigger on anything?
If we were looking to purchase property for some kind of transitional housing or permanent supportive housing, that could be an option. Just temporary shelters, I'm not sure. I believe it has to be some kind of transitional housing.
And Valerie, by June, it has to be encumbered, right? Not actually spent.
Not spent, just encumbered, correct.
So again, my thought, just, thinking out loud, is that if there would be a possibility of entering into some sort of an agreement for a location, for us to at least start that process to be able to use that $500,000 towards the acquiring of a particular location that we'd be able to do something with in the future. So if we were in contract, or if we had something identified, is there a time limit as to how long it would have to be before we actually completed a project?
I don't believe so. As of right now, we just need to get it encumbered so that that funding is restricted to what we encumber it and direct it towards.
And I believe, Valerie, that there may be limitations on if we do acquire property, how long we would hold it before a project was built. Under the old redevelopment rules, it was 5 years that you could hold property that you acquired before you actually did a project. So my guess is it's probably something similar.
Okay, and then I do want to clarify, Valerie, you're talking, as we're talking about the $1,123,000. That's a cumulative number. So we have $550,000 to spend by June of this year. But then it's only $144,000 by June of 2023. So I'm a little lost as to how the $1,123,000 could be cumulative.
So the way it works is, and that's a great question, because I talked with our consultant about that, and she spoke with her group as well on that. And the way we understand it and interpret it is that the $550,000 that we need to encumber most recently or most immediately needs to be encumbered by June 30th, 2022. So that amount will cover the $144,000, because we can say by June 30th, 2023, we've already encumbered $550,000, which is greater than the 144. And that money is just money that's been sitting in that pot and has grown. And so it's covered. Then when we go to July, the amount that needs to be spent by June 30th, 2024, that 1.1 million, we can say from July 1st, 2021 to that period, we've already encumbered 550,000. So the remainder is that 573,000 for the cumulative total of the 1,123,653.
Mayor Pro Tem, it's confusing how those amounts are calculated, which is why the city hires a consultant to tell us what that is. But Valerie, just to provide clarity and maybe provide an example, it's possible that the city council could set aside 1.1 million for encumbrance for the purchase of land for an affordable housing project that would satisfy the requirements. It's not actually spent. It's just the city's going to encumber these funds internally to spend on a project of this sort. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so does staff have anything in mind at this point? Or are we starting from scratch tonight?
We'll be starting from scratch tonight.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, I think as we've talked about making housing more affordable, this is obviously affordable housing money with certain restrictions on income limits and income restricted housing with covenants. But potentially there is a process whereby staff can acquire property for a larger project, whether it's for homeless housing or for affordable housing, but there's the ability to partner potentially on a larger development or even acquire property that's available now for sale for a future project, so long that some of that project cost goes towards affordable housing units, whether it's a mixed project where a portion of the units are affordable or the entirety of the development is affordable.
My thought process with the real estate market the way it is right now, us having to do something in the next 3 months is going to be extremely difficult. The one last question, as we talked about trying to do something with some inventory that's already in place. So just to be clear, we're not going to be able to buy units at Heritage Oaks, but we would not be able to use this money to subsidize market rate housing that's already in place in order to bring it into the affordable category.
When
we would actually have to acquire it. So I'm just saying, let's say, for example, we'll use Heritage Oaks, even though I know we got restrictions on how much can be used for seniors. Could we possibly lease those properties for a period of time and sublet them at the extremely low rate?
I think the key to that is that we have to make sure that there's a deed restriction on them so that it is kept for affordable housing for 55 years.
Okay, so we wouldn't be able to do
I
something.
think it would be, I think Mayor Pro Tem would be slightly different. We would have to buy the unit and then agree to lease it or sell it to a qualified low-income purchaser. And the budget covenants that it could only be resold to a qualified low-income occupant. So I think what Valerie was saying is we couldn't use it to subsidize rent. We couldn't go to I don't believe we could go to an existing apartment complex and say, would you let us rent from you 10 units at market rate rent, which we would then turn around and rent to a low income occupant? I don't think we can do that.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
So at this point, I guess we're in a situation that we have to start having a more detailed conversation immediately to try to figure out what to do with this, especially the $550,000 by June of this year. I do not believe it's going to be possible for us to actually acquire any properties or even start negotiating today and come up with something.
We wouldn't need to acquire them or spend the money. We would just need your direction to say that's what we're going to do with the money.
Now, what we need to do is be able to say that, yes, we want staff to identify an affordable housing project that we want to support.
Right. So I guess the question is, what constitutes encumbering? What's the level of detail that the city has to engage in so that that money will be deemed to be encumbered as compared with spent or compared with actually expended? Is there a definition that we've identified, or is that something that we lawyers would have to advise you about?
I think that's something you lawyers would have to advise us about. It doesn't really, just the health and safety code that I've read does not give too much detail on what encumber is defined as specifically.
So, for example, it's not uncommon for cities in a housing authority to have an encumbrance set aside for future acquisition of property for this targeted income levels and mash that up. So encumbrance is a fancy finance term meaning set aside for future use for this specific area. Case in point, in our reserve and our general fund balance, we have a reserve component. We also have an amount we've set aside for future pension obligations. We've sort of encumbered some of those funds for future pension obligations. This is very similar where you have fund balance that's being set aside for a specific project. So don't necessarily have to spend, but have to agree on what we're going to set aside.
So if we've got a fairly broad definition of what constitutes encumbrance, it may be possible for us to come up with, possible for the city to come up with a plan that the council could approve that would constitute encumbrance, even though we don't have a specific site or a specific piece of property under purchase or under contract or in escrow.
How long can we?
I think the answer to the question is, what constitutes an encumbrance under that section of the health and safety code? And sounds like we need to get you an opinion on that.
How long can we encumber funds? Silence.
Don't know.
Yeah, I think that was the question that was asked earlier, and Jeff kind of was thinking it was about 5 years, but we'll have to look in and get.
You know, I'm operating under different rules that don't exist anymore. So
yeah, we need to advise you on that.
We haven't. I mean, the fact is that the city hasn't been in the affordable housing business for a very long time. So we'd have to. We just want, what we're seeking now is just And does the council want to do affordable housing? We've got a pot of money that we can go build new housing units with, or we can give it back to the state, or we can give it to somebody else. I mean, those are really three simple, at the basic level, what the choices are. And if we decide that we want to do something with it in the city, you know, either by acquiring property or otherwise developing affordable housing, then we can work with Bill's office and others to come up with a plan to do that.
Well, let's be realistic. At a little over $1.1 million prevailing wages, you're not going to build much.
So Jeff, is it possible, for example, to say a developer comes to the city and needs a general plan zoning amendment to build certain housing, could in fact the city then, as part of that negotiation, offer the 1.1 million for just to say, we will contribute 1.1 million in return. You set aside 3 or 5 units for affordable housing with a 55-year covenant.
Right, exactly. And I'm thinking
it can be, council member, it can be a bunch of different alternatives that come up. It can be a subsidy, but in return for that investment, you have to have the 55-year covenant on those units that it's applicable to.
Okay, so we do not need to identify a site.
Not at this moment, no. So I am ready to make a motion to receive and file this report, to direct staff to forward the report, and to direct staff to find a way in which the city of Glendora can invest in affordable housing and spend our money in the city of Glendora on affordable housing. Thank you.
But do we want to bring that back before that date runs out, that we have to give the money back? So we have to make a decision?
Yes, staff will come back as soon as possible with some scenarios and potential encumbrance areas.
Great.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second.
Seconded.
Yes, motion and second, and that's to receive and file the annual report, direct staff to forward the report to California Department of Housing Community Development, and to direct staff to return to council with alternatives. Is that to a date certain?
As soon as possible.
Encumber those funds with alternatives to encumber those funds within the meaning of the health and safety code.
Thank you. Is just as soon as possible is okay to put in?
That's what Adam said.
Okay, that's fine. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas?
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer?
Yes.
And Mayor Davis?
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie and Jeff and Mr. Raymond. All right, that takes us to member staff and closing comments. I would like to have come back along these same lines at a meeting in the not too distant future, a conversation amongst council about housing for our unhoused residents. We have talked about it before. We talked about the idea of a regional project. I think it's at the point where we need to pull the lever and have council say what we're willing to do, whether or not other cities are part of that or not, because I think other cities are waiting for somebody else to do something. So I would like to bring it back to council for discussion, what we are willing to do, because otherwise it's going to be hanging out there in space.
I will second that, but I would like to put a date on it as opposed to the near future.
Yes, no, I was thinking that too, but I just don't want to overwhelm staff.
So we've had quite a bit of items for March and April. Looking at Moises and Jeff and Valerie for that conversation follow-up. Is there a specific month in which you'd like to come back to have that conversation?
When are we on vacation?
Never.
July and August.
I would think May, just from the standpoint of I want council to have the conversation to give staff direction more than I'm expecting staff to do something prior to that.
Exactly.
I want us to have that conversation and say, hey, we're ready to pull the lever on X, Y, or Z, rather than, I don't want staff to have to do a lot of work prior to that.
Agreed.
So if that's the case, we can come back sooner if it's just for a future council discussion on that item to give staff direction, because that would, after the direction, staff would have to spend significant time then looking over the council direction that's there. And I think we provided enough options the last time to talk about the different types of housing and location where it's currently zoned that we could come back for that conversation sooner than later.
Okay, so what would be a good date in your mind then?
March 22nd.
We could do that.
Okay. Sounds good.
And to be clear, Mayor Pro Tem, this is just a discussion on potential homeless housing options, and pick up where we left off last time. And we'll give an update on our conversations on the sub-regional plan.
Yeah, the council has already weighed in on the fact that we're supportive of doing something. The direction that we've been taking doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So now it's time to sharpen our pencil and try to figure out what the next step looks like.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Any other council members have any other statements or comments?
No, thank you.
Well, I just want to affirm what you said, Karen, about Gary and Connie, and what a stellar part of our city they both of them are, but Gary has especially been. And we know that he's in a better place because he has been suffering, but he will be missed. And I hope that people will surround her and the business which they have with their grace and care.
Thank you. Very well said. Any other council members, or Mr. Raymond or Mr. Winder?
None for me, Mayor.
Nor for me.
And any other department heads still on the call that had any announcements? Okay, well, seeing none, then we will close our meeting tonight at 9:51 in memory of Gary Andrews. We are